Good morning. Thank you so much for attending this morning's session on our final day on the local focus of CRS. Before we step into the presentations, I want to invite you to watch a video from this session's sponsor, Forerunner, on the great work they do in our industry.
Forerunner is the floodplain management platform for resilient communities. Our web-based software is built for local government and delivers actionable property-level flood risk information to users. We streamline floodplain management by combining FEMA and local data sets, enable compliance with custom flood warnings, and accelerate outreach through features like resident logs and white-labeled flood information website for resident education. We help ensure that permitting goes smoothly with our EC error detection feature, which runs over 100 validation checks on each elevation certificate. Our customers also use our substantial improvement and substantial damage tracker to make sure that construction is well documented for the CRS. Forerunner has worked with communities like Harris County, Texas, and Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. Our software has saved communities across the country thousands of staff hours. To learn more and to request a free pilot, please go to www.withforerunner.com.
Thank you, Forerunner, for being a partner of the ASFPM National Conference and for sponsoring this session. Our first presentation is from Shannon Hulst, the floodplain specialist and CRS coordinator for Barnstable County, which includes the Cape Cod area of Massachusetts. I first met Shannon when I taught a class in Massachusetts back in 2017 and quickly learned what a fantastic resource she is to floodplain management. Shannon assists communities, businesses, and residents with flood-related technical assistance, with an overall goal of improving flood resiliency. She manages a first-of-its-kind regional CRS program, so much so that Barnstable County's program earned the ASFPM James Lee Witt Local Award for Excellence in Floodplain Management in 2017. Her work serves as the inspiration for a bill from Congressman Bill Keating of Massachusetts in the pending NFIP reauthorization. Shannon also serves on the board of the Massachusetts Association for Floodplain Management and was the recipient of the National 2020 CRS Award for Excellence from FEMA. Shannon will be joined at the end of her presentation by Joy Duperrault, the Massachusetts NFIP coordinator, and Katie Rand from FEMA Region 1, and Molly Kaput from FEMA Region 1 will join us for the Q&A. Also note that there is a slight pause towards the end of the video, so that's not your system, it's a video. It'll pick back up after a few seconds, so don't freak out. So let's welcome Shannon as she discusses how to make regional CRS and floodplain management work for resource-limited communities.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Hulst. I am the floodplain specialist and regional CRS coordinator for Barnstable County, Massachusetts through Cape Cod Cooperative Extension and Woods Hole Sea Grant. Today, I'm going to talk about regional CRS and floodplain management and how to make that work for resource-limited communities like those that we have in New England. This presentation came out of lots of conversations with DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is where our state NFIP office is housed, and with FEMA Region 1, talking about how we all coordinate and collaborate and how this regional approach really helps everyone in the floodplain management world here. So an overview, I'll go over an explanation of the position and some background, the CRS regional management, then regional floodplain assistance, and then talk more about that collaboration with state and federal authorities. So some quick background here. Cape Cod, which is Barnstable County, Massachusetts, is that southeast corner of Massachusetts that sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean. We have 15 towns, all of which have at least one coastline. Some have up to 3 coastlines. And we have over 50,000 acres of floodplain within the county. So the program was created in 2015. This is a joint position, as I said, with Woods Hole Sea Grant and Barnstable County's Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. The mission or the goal of the position is to get all interested towns into the CRS and then improve their ratings as much as possible and as much as they would like. Then to assist with floodplain management overall and general National Flood Insurance Program regulations, and also to improve flood resiliency overall. A few items of note about this position. It won the 2019 CRS Award for Excellence. It was also recognized with the 2017 James Lee Witt Local Award for Excellence in Floodplain Management from ASFPM. And it served as the inspiration for part of the NFIP reauthorization bill. It would create funding for more positions like this to have more regional positions throughout the country. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you for your area, if and when that reauthorization bill gets passed, then there should be some funding in there for more positions like this. So moving on to regional CRS management and how it operates. First, a quick status update of what it looks like here. So of our 15 towns, 9 are currently in the program. 5 are new since the creation of this position in 2015. The 4 that were in the program before have all gone through 5-year audits, and 3 of them have improved by at least 1 class, in one case 2 classes, and we are hoping to see that 4th one improve another class this fall. We have 1 Class 9 community, 5 Class 8 communities, and 3 Class 7 communities. We also have 4 applications in progress. Our policyholders see $451,000 in annual savings, and that is spread out across 3,000 policyholders in those 9 towns. So how does the basic CRS technical assistance work? Well, it is ongoing project management. My role is to support the community CRS coordinator. Every community does have their own CRS coordinator. I cannot serve that role for all of them. One of the major things that I do is reduce the workload on the community. I am able to do some of the work for them, which tends to be very helpful. I'll go more into that next. But another important thing that I do is assist with staff transitions. In the last 6 years, 15 either CRS coordinators or building commissioners have transitioned to new roles, and new folks have come in. So when we see that, that can be a really tough time for there to be consistency. So I'm able to work with the new person, explain what their duties are, explain how I'm able to help with CRS and floodplain issues, and then help keep that transition smooth. I also serve as a regional contact for FEMA and ISO, so they can reach out directly to the towns, but they either keep me in the loop or talk to me directly if we want to talk about multiple towns or figure out who the right person is to contact, things like that. I assist with the annual recertifications, as well as the application and 5-year cycle visits. At the time of the application and the 5-year cycle, I talk to the towns about what they might be interested in getting credit for, what they can get credit for what they're already doing, and what might be worth taking on. For the most part, we start with just what they're already doing and talk about what makes sense to document and what doesn't, for the sake of CRS credit. And then I also run a regional CRS user group. So talking about the things that I am able to do for the towns. So this is streamlining that resource use so that all 15 towns aren't trying to do each one of these things on their own. And I'm able to make everything more efficient by being one person who's doing this for all 15 towns in some cases, or the 9 towns that are in the program. So GIS, a lot of the towns either don't have GIS or barely use it or have minimal access to it. So I'm able to do things like create impact adjustment maps for those communities. Even if they do have GIS, there are certain steps to follow that just make sense. And if I'm used to doing those, then it's just faster for me to do it. So it makes more sense for me to use my own time than to have the towns do that. There are also templates. The CRS program does create and make available some really, really helpful templates. So we start with those, and then I make them more applicable to our local communities and then pass them out to the local communities. Sometimes I'll create my own templates, or if a town creates their own, then I'll ask to borrow that and share it with the other communities so that nobody is reinventing the wheel. Outreach projects, the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension is the outreach branch of the county. So we create publications and those get delivered by us to all of the town halls on the Cape. So we are sure that they will get credit and that all of the towns have those. Same thing with our website. Our website is designed to be an educational resource and to get CRS credit where appropriate. So we have the towns link to our website. Elevation certificate reviews. I'm going to mention this several times throughout the presentation because this is extremely helpful. If you're in the CRS, you know how important accurate elevation certificates are. And if you come from a small community, or maybe this is all communities, it's often difficult to actually get those to be accurate. So I help the towns by offering to review them, trying to get them to send them to me before they issue their certificate of occupancy. Some do, some don't. That's a work in progress. But I almost always review them before recertification time or at recertification time. It's better if they send them to me, you know, more than a week out from the due date. But that's a work in progress. And the building departments do know to send those to me if they want at least a second set of eyes on them. Repetitive loss data access. If you have tried to access this data recently, you know that FEMA's process has changed. It's gotten a bit more complicated and challenging. I am working with FEMA to try to set up an agreement to access the data for all 15 towns so that I can pass it on to them and they don't each have to go through their own process. Don't know if that'll work or not with our lawyers involved, but even if it doesn't, then I am able to help them, you know, give them a template, tell them what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to contact, etc. Documentation from regional entities. So we do get credit from some regional groups like our local real estate association. We have mosquito control folks that work on drainage. And we also get credit for some activities from our regional planning agency, the Cape Cod Commission. So I work with each of those entities directly and get the documentation directly from them and then pass it out to the towns so that the towns don't have to spend any time on that. And then similarly with the state, we have a statewide building code that is easy to document once and then share it with all of the communities because we all have one building code. So some regional CRS management keys to success. So certainly centralizing the workload and streamlining that resource use when possible makes a whole lot of sense. It reduces the workload for each town and makes it more efficient and makes it more possible for each town to improve their rating within the CRS. Consistent reporting and documentation across communities. You know, part of using the templates, if I know that certain wording is going to work for one community and has gotten credit in that community, then I know it will work for the others. So it just makes sense to keep things consistent. Maximizing credit through documentation of existing capabilities. So I mentioned that of our 4 communities that were in the CRS program before I started here, 3 of them have improved their rating since. That's because of the centralization of that workload that we're able to do, that I'm able to take on some of that work for them and make sure that we're documenting all the really great work that they are doing. They just didn't have a chance to document it before. Using those regional resources that, again, those regional and state entities that we're getting credit for, that we only have to document once. Again, elevation certificate reviews, these are really, really important. And that's also related to basic floodplain management assistance, which is also really critical. And I'm going to go into that next. But with these last 2, with the EC reviews and basic floodplain management assistance, I've learned that this is a really key part to the success of the CRS program on the Cape, because I'm able to build these relationships with, especially our building departments, but with our communities throughout the year. It's not just at annual recertification time or cycle visit time. It's all throughout the year. If they have questions about basic floodplain management or have an elevation certificate for review, it keeps up that relationship and that conversation throughout the year so that it's not just about the CRS program, and we're able to build that relationship as we go. So moving on to regional floodplain assistance. So what does this look like? So the primary thing that I do here is providing technical assistance to building departments especially, but also to conservation or planning or even community boards. Sometimes there are unusual things that come up, like questions about historic structures. We have a lot of those in floodplains on the Cape, or maybe there's one particular structure that there are a lot of questions about, and the town has a meeting with all of the consultants and will bring me in as well for any floodplain questions. I also provide trainings and also CFM credits and exams. I think the CFM program is a great way to remind people that floodplain management exists and that there are regulations that we're enforcing. And so giving someone access to that accrediting program, and then also providing the credits on the Cape. Before everything became virtual, it could be difficult for people to leave the Cape to earn their credits to maintain their CFMs. It takes 2 hours to drive from one end of the Cape to the other. So it can be hard for someone in a small community that's wearing 15 hats to drive, basically take a whole day to attend a training that will get them credit. So I try to bring as many on Cape as possible. Again, reviewing those ECs before the certificate of occupancy. I said I was going to say it a lot. This is really important. If you take anything away from this, that's probably the most important thing you can help with from a regional floodplain and CRS perspective. I also get questions about flood insurance and mitigation from homeowners and business owners, and sometimes contractors themselves will call me directly and ask questions about the regulations. We do also a lot of public outreach, public meetings, trying to get information about different aspects of floodplain management and flood insurance and the CRS out there. And then also regional flood resilience projects. So that's kind of a really big umbrella that covers a lot of projects that we do. Grants that we get, for example, we're working on a bylaw project that we're going to talk about a little bit more later, or we put together a guide on the regulations and the exemptions for historic structures and floodplains. Those are just some examples that fall into that. A summary, number summary of this program. You can probably tell that I put this together for my elected officials, but it gives a good overview of the impact that the regional program has. So technical assistance and outreach events, there have been 700 of those between events that have reached several people and individual requests for assistance on specific homes and businesses. We've reached 5,000 people. The number of certified floodplain managers working on the Cape has tripled. We've brought $750,000 in grant funding into the county, and we've saved residents and businesses $1.8 million on flood insurance since 2015. So you can see that the program really does have some impact. So some keys to success for regional floodplain management. It reduces the workload on the town staff. They are always happy to pass off an elevation certificate to me, or to just not have to be an expert on that part of the building code or their general flood regulations, whatever it is. They're able to pass some things off to me, and they're always happy to do that. I'm a local resource for floodplain questions. So the state and FEMA are wonderful resources, but they don't live and work in this community. I do, so I know the neighborhood that somebody calls and asks me about. I might even know the house specifically, or it may be an area. There's one area that floods a lot, and when I worked in the office, I used to take a walk by there every day. So there are ways that I know the community, and it just makes it easier to build relationships and build respect and build trust with the town staff and community leaders, and that really makes it easier for them to come to me with questions, and also for them to therefore improve floodplain management overall, and for me to do my job. And then the other side of that is also building relationships and engaging with state and federal resources. So that piece really is a key to regional floodplain management success. And we're going to go into that in a bit more detail now. So what does collaboration with FEMA and the state look like? We have shared technical assistance. So Often towns will come to me first with a question. Again, I live and work in this community. I've met with them face to face, probably several times. They know me. So they may come to me first. If I don't know the answer, then I pass them to either Joy Duperalt at the state or Eric Carlson at the state. Both are really great resources for folks here. And if we need to, then we bring in FEMA Region 1 if it will go beyond all of us. I'm able to identify the correct staff to bring to the table. So sometimes we may have either an enforcement issue, a violation, or just some other issue. And FEMA and the state are able to come to me and say, okay, this town is within your county. Here's the issue. Who do we need to make sure is there? And similar to that, I can help FEMA and the state understand the local circumstances and the local context. And the local communities, I'm able to connect them to the state and federal resources, but they feel like, they have someone on their side because, of course, as we all know, floodplain management can get really, really detailed, and it can be hard to follow if it's not something that you work on all the time. So the towns have expressed that they're grateful to have me there to help navigate through those kind of complex challenges, and they feel like someone is there supporting them when they're working with the state and FEMA. And then also, when I do hear from towns and I start to hear consistent issues come up throughout the towns, then I can identify that need for those trainings and bring those to the Cape. It used to be that I would ask DCR and FEMA to come to the Cape physically, and those were really, really successful trainings. So in putting this presentation together, I also have co-presenters from the state and from FEMA. So this presentation, this slide is from Joy Duperalt, who is the state NFIP coordinator with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And she put together a list of the projects that we could remember that we've worked on together over the last several years. We put together a state model floodplain bylaw in 2020. I was working on a project to do that for the Cape, and we were talking, because we do talk on a regular basis. I was telling her about it and with Molly Kaput as well from FEMA Region 1, and we said, well, the whole state needs a new model bylaw, so why don't we all do this together? So that made a lot of sense. We work together on user group training opportunities and outreach. They participate whenever they can, the state and FEMA. Substantial improvement exemption for historic structures. I mentioned we have a lot of those. So I am the person who has worked on that the most in the floodplain world in Massachusetts with the help of a historic preservation specialist from the Cape Cod Commission and coordinating with the state and with FEMA. But we were able to put together some resources that now DCR can share with other parts of the state. We've done a substantial damage determination training, a couple of those actually. We worked with Rhode Island Sea Grant's legal program to bring in a training on legal liabilities for municipalities related to climate change. And that was a couple of years ago, but it continues to be a very popular training. And working with DCR, we were able to get that to other parts of the state as well. Again, various floodplain management trainings, and Joy and I coordinate on proctoring CFM exams. We coordinate to see, can we both proctor? Should one of us proctor? And what part of the state are we going to have it in? And does it make sense to hold an exam now? So next, we have a couple of comments from my co-presenters. So first, we will hear from Joy Duperalt, the state NFIP coordinator.
Hi, I'm Joy Duperalt, the state NFIP coordinator for Massachusetts. I've worked with Shannon ever since she came to Cape Cod, and I have to say, she's fabulous. It's so effective to have a regional CRS coordinator and floodplain manager. Shannon works with 15 towns on the Cape, which removes a nice burden from my workload. But we also work together on mutually beneficial projects. Shannon worked with our team last year to update the state's model floodplain bylaw, and she has worked with us on numerous issues that required local clarification, such as the substantial improvement exception for all those historic structures on Cape Cod. She's also used her resources to bring additional training to others beyond the Cape, such as her work with the Rhode Island Sea Grant legal program, who brought us some excellent sessions on legal matters for local liability due to climate change. Whenever my phone call shows a call from Shannon Hulst, my day gets a lot brighter. Thank you, Shannon.
And thank you, Joy. You can tell Joy is also very kind, and she's wonderful to work with. Now we also have some comments from Katie Rand from FEMA Region 1.
Hello, my name is Katie Rand and I work for FEMA Region 1's Floodplain Management Branch. I'm the FEMA Regional Point of Contact for Floodplain Management in Massachusetts and the Deputy CRS Coordinator for FEMA Region 1, which includes the states and tribal nations of New England. I've been working with Shannon for 2 years and would like to comment on the impact of the Regional CRS and Floodplain Management Program on Cape Cod. Shannon knows the communities, the people, and the local bylaws, helping us bridge that gap between local and federal. Our connection with Shannon has truly enhanced our relationships with the individual communities on Cape Cod, leading to improved cooperation and compliance. Shannon enables us and our state partners to work with 15 communities through just one point of contact. Shannon identifies the knowledge gaps and training needs of the Cape Cod communities, providing a personalized level of service that FEMA just cannot provide. Setting up the logistics, getting the right people in the room, and collaborating with us on training is vital and incredibly helpful. We recently collaborated with Shannon and our Massachusetts state partners on training related to letters of map revision based on fill, and another on substantial damage plans and procedures. This program on Cape Cod has been a force multiplier for FEMA Region 1 floodplain management and the CRS program, increasing acceptance and knowledge of floodplain management, improving compliance, and creating and maintaining exemplary community floodplain management programs. Thank you.
Great. So thank you to Katie and Joy, and thank you as well to all of you. Hopefully that gave you an idea of how regional floodplain and CRS management work on the Cape. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shannon, for such a fantastic presentation. And I appreciate you and Katie and Molly joining us for this Q&A. We have a lot of questions, a lot of interest in this topic. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. So this is kind of a 74-part question I'm going to put together here. In lieu of a full-time regional floodplain manager, like yourself, what changes or enhancements to the CRS program do you feel are needed to make this regional approach work for other areas? And as you're trying to figure out how to make it work, how do you onboard new staff, get them trained up? What happens when your community official comes from like inland to coastal and is still learning what waves do? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Del. So ways to get it to work for other communities, something that's really important to know about how we do it here, really in New England is, we have small communities and our counties don't really have any jurisdiction. So our communities are the ones with jurisdiction, and other parts of the country, the counties do have jurisdiction. So, you have to consider what your jurisdiction is. So how many different entities you want to put together in a region. So maybe lots of counties, maybe lots of communities. You also want to consider, how much building you have, how much development in your floodplain, maybe how many elevation certificates you get a year, what your population looks like, your overall area of your community. So there are lots of different things to consider. I feel like my 15 communities, I'm able to really delve into the weeds there with them. And that's probably about all I could handle. I don't know how many more communities I could take. But that's a good thing to consider. In terms of onboarding staff, especially building commissioners, those are the biggest folks to onboard. It's just about calling them up and explaining who I am and what my role is, and just saying I'm from the government, I'm here to help, and just explaining what I can offer, and then also letting them know that I can also help them connect to our other resources at the state and with FEMA.
Gotcha. Well, and you mentioned the different communities you're working with. A couple questions on that. What factors contributed to getting the tribal community involvement in your work?
So we do have a tribe on the Cape, but there is no jurisdiction within the floodplain. So that is not a huge factor. We do connect with them about emergency management, but for CRS purposes and floodplain management, it isn't a factor.
Gotcha. So in looking at these various communities you have there been any conflicts between you and the individual communities, or and how do you overcome those, or also like navigating some of the residents, such as your really high value homes over on the Cape?
Right. So we certainly know that there are some high value, high profile folks here. There have been some minor conflicts with staff. My position was new. This had never happened before. So town staff didn't really know what to do with it. So there was definitely some relationship building that had to happen. A lot of in-person meetings and talking on the phone and just going out and meeting them where they were and really working on building those relationships. And understanding that they have a lot on their plates and doing what I can to help them. There have also been some conflicts with some applicants and property owners. Those basically, when they get too difficult, the towns pass them through to me or ask me to sit in on meetings. And we just try to explain to them what's going on, why they're not allowed to break those rules. And then again, we are able to do a direct line to FEMA and the state. And Molly and Katie and Joy have all helped and come in on certain questions of those and sat in on some of those meetings with us to help clarify.
Excellent. Well, and looking at funding, so there's a lot of questions tied to this. So how do you have a cost per town to be involved? And is there funding from that way? Or is your this position funded by Cooperative Extension, NRCS? And how does reauthorization of the NFIP fund work into the funding for all this?
Yeah, so my funding, it started with a seed grant from Woods Hole Sea Grant. Now I am joint staff for both Cape Cod Cooperative Extension and Woods Hole Sea Grant. So there was the right time, the right pot of money with Sea Grant, and then the county agreed to fund the rest of my salary. We do not ask for money from the towns. The towns don't pay anything. So it's county funded and some Sea Grant funds as well. And of course we pursue grants as well. With the reauthorization, provided it passes and provided this bill stays in it, then I think it would allocate about $5 million for other regional coordinators like myself, so that would be a fund to get everybody started. And I think it would go for the first 5 years, and then the communities would have to pick up the salary after that.
Gotcha. So how many policies do you have in your area, in your region?
We have about 10,000 policies right now.
Gotcha. Okay. So diving down the rep loss avenue here, for the rep loss data, are you working with FEMA on a multi-jurisdictional ISAA or just asking for the data under routine use?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that question come in. That means I'm not the only one working on the regional ISAA. I am working on a regional ISAA. Katie and Molly have been aware of that whole thing. It's stalled at the moment. And right now I've been doing routine newsletters for the individual communities, but because I am not community staff, I need them to also submit their own routine newsletter. So I put it together for them, take the draft that FEMA sends, the template, and then make it work for our communities and then send it to them. So right now we're still operating under routine newsletters, but I'm really hoping that ISAA comes through so that then I can have get all of the data at once and then also pass it on to the communities within the Privacy Protection Act guidelines.
Gotcha. Well, Shannon, we've got a lot of questions that have come in. So just one more. How has COVID impacted the growth in your area, and what kind of challenges have you faced with that?
Yeah, so we've had a real estate and construction boom here. So there's been a lot going on. We've got a lot more questions on, what the rules are, and then also a lot more questions on why people have to follow the rules sometimes. So we are seeing that. There have been some issues with, staff not being in offices when we get to the annual CRS documentation phase. We're working on CAVs. Molly with FEMA has been great. We're working on a CAV right now, and we've kind of turned that into a virtual thing. So there are definite challenges with COVID, but we're all able to support each other and hopefully continue doing this good work.
Gotcha. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and the fantastic presentation. There's a lot more questions. Those will get to the presenters and we'll try to get those answered at some point. But yeah, great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dale.
Our next presentation is from Josh Overmyer. He is the Floodplain and CRS Coordinator for Charlotte County in Southwest Florida. Josh has 8 years of experience in floodplain management, having previously worked in the Florida State Floodplain Management Office, the town of Fort Myers Beach, and Lee County, Florida. He has also co-instructed the field-deployed L278 NFIP CRS course. I've had the privilege of working with Josh for years on the board of the Florida Floodplain Managers Association, and I'm extremely proud to say that Josh is the current chair of the Florida chapter of ASFPM. So please join me in welcoming Josh as he presents on CRS Retrograde, Now What?
Hello and welcome to session G1. My name is Josh Overmyer. I'm a certified floodplain manager working as the floodplain coordinator for Charlotte County, Florida. This presentation will be about CRS Retrograde, Now What? So first of all, who am I? I'm a former principal planner and CRS coordinator for the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Of course, as a coastal barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico, that is 100% special flood hazard area, including approximately 40% in the velocity zone. After leaving the town of Fort Myers Beach, I spent 3.5 years as a CRS specialist for the state of Florida, working in the Division of Emergency Management. Some of you may have seen me present at the 2018 ASFPM conference in Phoenix on the Florida CRS Initiative, State Support of Municipal CRS Programs. While working with the state, I helped enroll 26 communities into the CRS. We helped establish CRS user groups around the state and met one-on-one with communities to either help them achieve additional CRS credits or maintain their CRS ratings. And I personally wrote 8 new applications for CRS communities to join. I'm currently the chair of the Florida Floodplain Managers Association, as you can see in my background and on the screen. And I'm also the floodplain coordinator and CRS coordinator for Charlotte County in Southwest Florida. So setting this up, of course, you saw the title of the presentation, CRS Retrograde, Now What? Well, what happened to get us there? Well, the former floodplain coordinator retired in January of 2018 after a long career. I was hired in April of 2018 and started my job in the middle of May. Our three-year CRS cycle visit was already scheduled for September 18th before I had even started. This is kind of what I looked like walking into that new position. Yikes. But then what happened? Well, our CRS cycle visit actually went well. Of course, I'm a CRS specialist coming from the state of Florida. I'm familiar with the CRS program and the 2017 CRS Coordinators Manual, even though it was still pretty new at that point. And I was familiar with our ISO CRS specialist, Greg Carpenter. But due to staffing and work overload, our file was actually transferred to a different ISO CRS specialist. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it was transferred to a specialist outside of the state of Florida. So they were not as familiar with the Florida state-based credits, Florida Building Code, our 1 foot freeboard that is applicable statewide, things like that. And somewhere in all of the mix-up, Charlotte County did not receive the 15-day letter. I could supply a copy of the 30-day letter we received, but we did not receive that sort of second and final opportunity to submit additional CRS documentation. So then panic set in. Yikes. We received a draft verification report from the new ISO CRS specialist, the one from out of state, trying to classify us as a category 8, whereas Charlotte County had been a CRS class 5 communities since, I believe, 2009. So that was a really big shock to be losing 3 classes, and there was no reason whatsoever we should have dropped 3 whole classes. So ISO worked with us to allow additional 15 days, submit more information, more background materials. I also worked with Sherry Harper to document and establish those state-based standards, the Florida-based credits that we should have received that we didn't. But in the end, we lost over 500 points, which is, of course, more than a full CRS class. Up next came the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally moving on to acceptance. Denial looked like this. No, this can't happen. I'm a CRS expert. Surely they missed something. Anger. How could they score us so low? I hate CRS. Bargaining. What if we could get them to re-review activity 540? Maybe we could get them to tack on benchmark maintenance. We've already recovered those. The hard part is depression. I was literally hired based on my CRS expertise. One bad visit led us to lose CRS discounts totaling more than $1.3 million for Charlotte County residents. But eventually I moved on to acceptance. It is what it is. What can I do moving forward to achieve additional CRS credit points? Get us back over that 2,500 point threshold. A major help was our administration. They were very understanding. They just wanted me to do what was necessary to get back above that 2,500 point threshold, to get back to a CRS class 5 and get those discounts back for our residents. There was no blame or shame. They understood that I was basically in a no-win situation, walking in to a new community just 4 months before the CRS cycle visit was already scheduled for me in this new job. So then we set off searching for points. We compared this new 2018 verification report with our prior verification reports, both 2014 and 2011. What are the things that we could tweak? What are the things we've missed? We also combed through the CRS coordinator's manual. What are new things, new activities that we could implement? What are some of the things that look cool, but there's not a whole lot of points, so it's not worth the effort? Here is a look comparing 7 CRS activities from our 2014 and our 2018 verification reports. On this slide, it's not really important to see the number of points per activity, the point differences. I'll get to those later. But you can see, as I've color coded these, the purple and the red activities completely disappear. We had some number of points, and then we got 0. All told, in just these 7 CRS activities, we lost 662 points. That's about a class and a third. I put this chart together to show the actual points lost per activity. You can see in the red, activity 540, channel debris removal. We had, in 2014, 245 points. That went to 0. In the yellow, activity 430, higher regulatory standards. We had 284 points. That dropped to 116. Charlotte County is at fault for this one. In 2016, a couple years before I was hired, Charlotte County adopted the Florida state model flood ordinance that's coordinated with the Florida Building Code. Charlotte County had prior higher regulatory standards that were not carried forward intentionally when the new ordinance was updated. That resulted in the loss of these 168 points. In the green is activity 330. Not a big difference, not a whole class or anything like that, but 247 down to 200 points for our outreach projects. We still got the 200 for full credit on OP the element for outreach projects. But that additional 47 points, that was flood response preparations. Those things that you have canned messages ready to go in advance of and during a flooding event. And then in the blue, activity 450, we went from 61 points, again, down to 0. Total loss of credit in that activity. I kind of grayed out a couple others. The 610, 360, those weren't huge losses of points. 16 points, 8 points, not even hardly noteworthy in the grand scheme of things. But you can see, we did lose points in these 6 activities. On this chart, I've shown the 4 largest activities again, and that dramatic drop in points: 47 points, 168 points, 61 points, and 245. Now, it wasn't all bad. We did increase our points in activity 440 and activity 350. Negligible, in the grand scheme of things, once again, but 10 points and 4 points were picked up. So we started off with a logical approach. What are the big point elements we're missing? Activity 330, Program for Public Information, of course, is an option since the 2013 CRS Coordinator's Manual. I like to think of it as an enhanced outreach strategy, and it caused us to do an audit of all of our floodplain management related activities, outreach activities from the building department, public works, and emergency management. The PPI also requires a committee involving a floodplain manager and a public information officer from the local government, as well as at least 3 members from outside of local government. Since the same committee can help tackle this flood insurance promotion activity 370, we made sure that members of the committee included a banker, an insurance agent, and a realtor to help us cover the 3 largest stakeholders in the floodplain in Charlotte County. And the PPI will help us get up to 80 points additionally, as well as PPI bonus credit in different activities. And the second large element we decided to look into was the repetitive loss area analysis. Charlotte County is a category C repetitive loss community, according to the definition in the CRS Coordinator's Manual. We have approximately 130 non-mitigated repetitive loss properties. So we already have to address step 5C in the floodplain management plan, which is in Florida, the local mitigation strategy. But doing a repetitive loss area analysis would be, of course, specific to those repetitive loss areas and would help us earn up to 140 additional points. We have discussed hiring a consultant to help us with a repetitive loss area analysis, but at the present time, we have not moved forward with this element. Activity 540, channel debris removal, was a big area of focus for us. As you've seen in those past couple of slides, that was the biggest activity where we lost 245 points. The change to the 2017 CRS Coordinator's Manual is the culprit in this case. Most of our natural channels have been developed into channelized segments for creation of navigable canals for boating and enjoyment of the Charlotte Harbor area. We still maintain those channels. We have maintenance logs and maps to prove it. But the maps we provided in 2018 included our whole system, both man-made and natural channelized waterways. So we've tweaked those maps to try to get even 1 point in CDR, which of course would allow us to earn additional credits in 540, including stream dumping regulations, problem site maintenance, and our capital improvement program. We also looked for those smaller treasures, some of the smaller elements we could easily document and achieve some credit points, help us get back above that 2,500 point threshold. Activity 330, flood response preparations. As I showed, that was earlier, that little green line where we had 247 points, we dropped down to 200. Those are those canned messages you have in place, ready to go when a flood is threatening or has occurred. Of course, by the time a flood is threatening and approaching, it's too late to buy flood insurance. So that message is not eligible in flood response preparations, but all of your other flood response flood-related messages can count. This is something we, of course, were previously credited for, but it was tucked away in a different folder. I wasn't aware of it, so it wasn't something I submitted during the 2018 cycle visit. These are also being included in our PPI document so that those messages will achieve bonus points. Benchmark maintenance is part of activity 440, and we had the documentation prepared and ready to go, but it was not something I was aware of. You have to discuss an element or an activity in your CRS cycle visit in order to be eligible to achieve credit. You can't breeze through your meeting and then, oh, by the way, when your 30-day or your 15-day letter comes, submit documentation for a different activity that wasn't discussed and hope to achieve points. That's not how things are allowed to work. Of course, with benchmark maintenance, your benchmarks do have to be recovered within the past 5 years, and in this case, ours have. So I'm hopeful that at our next CRS cycle visit, we will be eligible to achieve those credit points. Up next, I've added this slide because there, of course, are always changes to the CRS program. The 2021 addendum to the CRS Coordinator's Manual came out in January. A big change is Activity 330. Instead of being credited for the percentage of your correct DCs as a percentage of 38 points, you will now get those 38 points for having and implementing a construction certificate maintenance plan standard operating procedure. This is inclusive of all elevation certificates, engineer flood opening certification, V-zone certificates as that may apply. I'm sure for a lot of you, you don't have V-zones. Any dry flood proofing certification. I believe also some of you may have those flood-proof basements. So that would be a different type of certification, something we have to deal with in Florida. Another big change to the manual, of course, is the CRS Class 8 prerequisite for us in Charlotte County that is necessitating an ordinance update. Earlier this week, when you're viewing this, we will have had our first reading to the Board of County Commissioners to update the ordinance to require that not just the existing residential stick-built homes have to meet the Florida Building Code 1-foot freeboard requirement, but also manufactured homes in existing parks that previously were allowed to be replaced on 36-inch engineered piers. They now have to meet the base flood elevation plus 1 foot, regardless of where they're located. In some places, that's going to actually be lower than that 36-inch requirement would have been if the BFE and the finished floor elevation are pretty close in height already. But other places along the river or along the Gulf of Mexico, some of those could be required to elevate an additional 5, 6, 8 feet in some cases. So that'll be interesting to see. Elevation certificates are now required to be recertified every year, not just during your CRS cycle visit. It's sort of been bifurcated from the CRS cycle visit process. Those will be submitted annually on your standard recertification date. For us and most of Florida, that's on May 1st. So every year I will be submitting my elevation certificates to the ISO CRS resource specialist. And in addition to that, the random sample used to be up to 70 elevation certificates per submission. Now that random sample is up to 200 elevation certificates each year. Sounds like a lot, but in my case, I had over 600 elevation certificates received for new construction in the special flood hazard area in the past year. And so I still submitted a permit list with those 642 permits on it. And the ISO CRS resource specialist sent back a random sampling of 200 elevation certificates, construction certificates that were needed, and I submitted those just a couple weeks ago, along with a copy of our CCMP SOP. But to recap, of course, I don't need to tell you this, but it's okay to grieve. We pour a lot of time and effort, our knowledge and experience into this program, but things happen and it's okay. You should compare your verification report with past VRs to see the differences. What are the things you didn't receive credit for that you used to, or what are the things that are missing that you can easily document? What are the things that you could implement that you aren't already doing? Where are that low-hanging fruit? I know we don't like to use that term anymore, but there are still activities and elements and other new changes to that addendum that I didn't even talk about here. Flood species plans and such. But of course, manuals change, you have staffing changes, your local regulations or your state regulations can change. It's not your fault. That's a fact of life. Change happens. And so I just want you to all recognize and realize that, and it's just a part of life. So Charlotte County actually has our CRS cycle visit this year. I mentioned the bifurcated elevation certificate recertification, and sometime probably this fall, we will have our 3-year cycle visit following up, the somewhat disastrous CRS cycle visit we had in 2018. So we're hopeful to get back to a CRS Class 5. Please wish us luck. And with that, I guess I'm available for any questions. Here is my contact information. Josh.Overmyer at charlottecountyfl.gov. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Josh, for that fantastic presentation, walking us through the trials of the retrograde, which I know is not easy. We got some questions here I want to dive into. Can you dive into the details a little bit more about how you found out about the retrograde?
Yeah, so it had been quite a while since I had even heard from my CRS, ISO CRS specialist, Craig Carpenter, who actually is local to Southwest Florida. So, know the guy, and we did stay in touch quite often, but like I say, it had been a few months. And so I reached out kind of after the Christmas holidays to see where we were. And he said, oh, by the way, that file was transferred. And almost immediately thereafter, I'm hearing that they were trying to close our file with a CRS Class 8. Dropping from a 5 down to an 8, a 3-class retrograde. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And so reaching out to the specialist that it was transferred to and trying to find out all the information, I found out, with the draft verification report that a lot of the things that we had submitted were not scored. We're not, receiving credit that we should have received. So I reached out to Sherry Harper, who at the time was a senior technical coordinator. Now, of course, she's the managing person over the whole ISO CRS team. And so in coordination with her, I did finally get that 15-day letter that we didn't receive, and was given that additional couple weeks to try to submit some documentation, but also in conversation with Sherry, was able to substantiate and document those Florida state-based credits that we should have been receiving that were not included in part of that Class 8 draft VR.
Gotcha. And so it's real important to stay in communication with your coordinator and look at the scoring to make sure stuff's not missed. So given that CRS coordinator staff turnover is a real challenge, and a lot of times people say, hey, it's now you're welcome. Would you have any general suggestions or programmatic ideas on how to address this?
Well, I mean, it's right there in the title. You're supposed to be the CRS coordinator. You really should never rely on one person to handle all of these activities. There's 92 different activities and so much documentation for the program. So you really need to have a team of folks that are all involved, so that if Josh Overmyer gets hit by a bus tomorrow, that the whole program doesn't fall by the wayside because there's no one else that's involved.
That's a really good point, Josh, is that it's coordinator, not doer. And so that's key in that title. So was there any political blowback from your local officials on the retrograde or from your residents, or did the residents even realize it was happening?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate in that our building official / community development director is a CFM. Our past community development director, who is now assistant county administrator, she's a CFM. So we've got CFMs from the ground up within our organization, and the understanding of some of the changes to the manual, how difficult some of the documentation is to provide. Basically, like I said in the presentation, no shame. They just want us to get back to the class 5 that we previously had. So really didn't feel the blame. I did feel supported, and okay, now let's pick ourselves up and just get back to class 5. As for the residents, these discounts are effective at each policy renewal, and it even takes a little while for those discounts to change each October or May. And so I think it's May 1. And so took a few months after we closed for them to even take effect. And then renewals, happen throughout the year. So I didn't get my first kind of angry call from an insurance agent actually until almost a year after the class retrograde took effect. And so the questions were really just, okay, why did we drop from a class 5 to a class 6? Why are my policyholders only receiving a 20% discount? And I just explained some of what happened. Nothing I can do about it now. Let's just work towards that class 5 again.
Gotcha. Well, with the retrograde process, did you look at using the class modification aspect to avoid it, or was that even an option?
Sure. So there wouldn't be any way to avoid the class retrograde. You can only change class one time per year. And so we were looking at dropping to a class 6 regardless. But some of the things that we need to document to achieve the 2,500 point threshold to get back to a class 5, we're going to take more than just a year to pull together. We're looking at the RLAA, we're looking at doing the PPI and things like that. And so we're just waiting for the cycle visit that's coming up this year. The 3-year cycle actually happens pretty quickly because it takes a few months to close a file, it takes a few more months to actually affect that change. And then suddenly, you're doing one recert, and then the next year it's a cycle visit again. And so 3 years, almost a misnomer. The visit was 3 years ago, but it's coming up very quickly.
Gotcha. Was there any push by your officials to notify residents in advance, or was it one of those, like you said, just keep your head down until?
We didn't send out a notification that, hey, we dropped a class. Not really something we wanted to publicize, and it turns out it wasn't as big of a deal as this guy thought. Taking all the brunt on myself, as this CRS expert that used to work in the state office. So luckily, It wasn't as bad as I made it out to be initially.
Excellent. Well, Josh, we appreciate you sharing your journey through this trial that is still ongoing a little bit, and fantastic presentation. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Dale.
Okay, so our final presentation is from Heather Hilliard with IEM. She's an experienced emergency management and flood mitigation professional with more than 25 years of service. Ms. Hilliard has served as a professor of practice at Tulane University in New Orleans for more than a decade and has lectured at U.S. Northcom, the Department of Defense, and the U.S. Industrial College of the Armed Forces. Heather recently served as Assistant Director of Emergency Management and the CRS Floodplain Coordinator for the City of Kenner, where she improved the CRS rating to a Class 6 and the Fire Department to a Class 1. She now works as a project manager, helping build safe, secure, and resilient communities. Among her accomplishments, Ms. Hilliard has earned federal and local commendations in New Orleans for her contributions to the responses of Hurricanes Katrina and Gustav, and her role in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill response. She has worked declared disasters, including F5 tornadoes, international typhoons, earthquakes, and public health epidemics. Ms. Hilliard's after-action report for the international response to a Pacific typhoon was shared with the United Nations to help reshape the way the world responds to catastrophes. So please help me welcome to the stage Ms. Heather Hilliard as we hear how to use emergency management as a lever to improve your CRS score.
Good morning, and thank you for joining me for this session at the ASFPM 2021 conference. I'm Heather Hilliard, and I'm going to help you see how emergency management and floodplain management really do integrate to help our communities. So in our emergency management programs, we consider an emergency management disaster life cycle. We also use this in mitigation and hazard mitigation as we're doing floodplain. But for emergency management, it's a more formal cycle than we've really seen in floodplain management activities or planning. Preparedness, responding, recovery, and mitigation are the four portions of the life cycle, and really they're in two different hemispheres: mitigate and prepare versus recover and respond. And they're segmented at this point by an event happening, that red square on your screen. Now, we can be preparing for something like hurricane season coming while we're responding to COVID-19, and we are still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura as we're still finishing mitigation from Hurricane Katrina. So these sections are not isolated. They're not done in segments. They really do flow back and forth and depend on what's going on in your community. Now, in each life cycle segment, you'll actually be able to see that there are different cycles within that life cycle. So for example, the preparedness cycle, you evaluate and improve. You identify things that you want to enhance. You organize, you come up with lists. You might do your emergency pre-disaster mitigation contracts, mutual aid contracts, things like debris removal, debris monitoring. Those are all things that we handle on the emergency management side of the house that really should be and are impacted by what we do in hazard mitigation and with floodplains. On the mitigation side, where I'm focusing more on these two sides today for our topic discussion, in mitigation, you see what are some long-term goals you want to achieve. An easy one is to reduce flooding in repetitive loss areas. Perhaps there's something that your municipality, parish, or community, maybe the county or the state could even do to make things better in that area. That's not necessarily something the homeowners would do, like elevate their homes. There's actions you can take and an action plan, which typically includes funding. One of the things that I'm going to find it's easiest to help you go through is if you are a CRS community, to go through some of the sections where emergency management really nicely integrates into the fold. These are different sections of the CRS manual and the addendum that was just put out in January of 2021. And this is how I'm going to review some of the things that we do in emergency management that I've been able to use in my community to go over these different topics, and found that there was an easy button, and we all need more easy buttons right now. So the first we'll go over is mapping. So in addition to all of your flood insurance rating maps, when I was in the city of Kenner, I just recently transitioned to a new position outside of the community, but in the city of Kenner, using it as an example, 1971, 74, 75, 85, 95, then we had the slight delay from Hurricane Katrina, and 2018 are the adopted firm maps. All right, and we have the BFE layers too, the base flood elevation. Now, if you look just at the section 320 in the manual, you will see all these different things that you could do. What we were able to do is take all of these components, some of which are local information, those you'll see in the gray atop of each of the different scenes. Some are red highlights because those might be federal or outside of our control or our literal touch points. The depths from Katrina, hazard events such as weather, the ice freezes we've had, fire maps, not only regional fires, but things about the next parish over if they had marsh fires that impacted our community. Tidal influence from NOAA, topography from the Geological Service, and emergency management, you'll notice, has a heavy rain list. I'll get to that a little bit more too, but emergency management does keep records typically of if you have an area that typically gets flooded where barricades need to go and police are sent, so that we know there are localized points that are troublesome and we might be able to do them better. So what we've done for the city of Kenner is we created a 24 different layer interactive map. This gets us some credit in 320 mapping in the section for the CRS manual and addendum, as well as 350 web access. So the things that I have highlighted here are the currently existed FEMA firm from 2018. That's showing in green. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll be able to see the library of all the different things we have. And this is just a screenshot, so I won't be scrolling through it. But one of the other things that I indicated were our LOMAs, where the homeowner has gone through FEMA, they've done mitigation, they have elevated their building. There are some other point of contestation. Their survey is different than what FEMA had done after Katrina. And those red spots are the exceptions so that they are elevated out of the AE flood zone. You'll notice on here that we have X, which has no indicator, AE, which is green, and we also have the tidal zone in blue at the top because that's Lake Pontchartrain. So we do have tidal effects. At the bottom, that's the Mississippi River. On the one side is St. Charles Parish, which is nearly entirely marsh and does not have a levee system. And to the right is the unincorporated parish component. So we were able to do this and receive all of our credit just by using layers that exist. You'll see in the addendum too, as you know, that we're looking at endangered species, wetland inventories. We have the international airport built on some soil concerns. So we have taken all of those, and you can click any one of those as a resident or as a visitor or just somebody doing research to see how our 24 different layers that we use interact with the city. Right. Moving forward to 330 outreach, that section of the manual, as well as the addendum, there have been some updates. I've just listed a few of the activities on both sides that are typical that we include or we need to do. Starting on the top side, the RL list, repetitive loss list. One of the things that I noticed when I tried to go ahead and get a repetitive loss list last year was that there were errors. So we had to work with the pivot team, and we had 198 new properties. We also had some that were smack in the middle of the city of Kenner that were moved to other communities in other parishes. We had some that just disappeared that didn't have mitigation. So a caution about your all city mailing, number 2 on this list, in the data impact section, is that make sure that your data is correct. So when you get a new RL list, emergency management can help you look at that too to say, hey, are these still in the area? So it's not just you as a floodplain manager looking by yourself to see. Emergency managers typically have great detailed knowledge of your local community and past historical knowledge too, that they'll be able to help you understand some of these things. We also do participate in the hazard mitigation plan as emergency managers. So that has an impact. That plan is approved every 5 years by FEMA. And there are emergency management components to that. So you may have somebody sit on the regional HM planning list so that you have a multi-jurisdictional HM plan, but maybe it's not you that alone has to sit on that committee because they can bring other great skills and knowledge into it. The PPI meeting, one of the new things in the addendum is having a specific town hall explicitly about flood insurance. And you get extra credit if somebody from the state can participate too from the insurance department. So it can't be a general town hall meeting where you're talking about potholes or garbage millage or things like that. It actually has to be specifically about flood insurance. Now, if people have other questions about floodplain mitigation, those can be discussed, but the advertisement has to be about flood insurance. Seasonal updates. One of the ways you can get credit in your PPI meeting, and down here in New Orleans, we actually have them every hurricane season. Your vulnerable communities, such as your nursing homes, going to talk to residents in a meeting session, or what we've been doing now is during COVID doing Zoom, so that there's a big screen and we can have smaller sessions, or we train the staff to give information to the residents and their families. Those seasonal updates, if you have a list from emergency management who participated, you actually get credit for that too in your PPI outreach section if you allow emergency management education activities to count as credit. You can also do training sessions on elevation certificates. This happened that I do both emergency management and floodplain management. So we set up sessions where we could talk to surveyors, and you can hit the most frequently problematic sections, or you can just do a general, hey, these are things to watch when you're filling this out, sections you have to have. If we find issues where your garage door, which has a total siding cannot be vented on the outside and your garage door needs vented, when you update your EC, you must actually include an updated picture or it is still not going to be approved as your final EC. Moving over to the other side for 350 in flood protection, make sure your updated copies are in the library, both printed and virtual, and at your emergency operations center. So at the emergency operations center, the EOC, some people come for information about hurricanes, flooding, because when they think of floods, they think of rising water. They might not think of emergency management as being part of floodplain, but that is typically where people will go for things like flooding and flooded roads. I showed you the web items. Something else that we put on the internet is links to our river gauges. We have the Mississippi River. We are currently in flood stage. When it goes so high, the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't allow piling, driving, or construction within 1,500 feet of the levee barrier. So things like that can also give you credit. You don't have to control the levee gauge. You just put the links on your website and enhance your website. If you have portions of your emergency operations plan that are public, part of our substantial damage management plan has been in our emergency operation plan for decades. That is something that now is formalized into policy for the addendum, and it very easily integrates what we've been doing using the new FEMA language. So talk to your emergency management folks about the components that they do for substantial damage, like debris management, the plans of who goes out, how do you get third parties? Does emergency management or code enforcement actually have that mutual aid or the emergency contract to bring in people to help? The last section on here is BSEGs. So one of the things that has been a bit confusing in some areas is how often do I have to do this? What do I need to fill on the form? If you are a community such as ours, which was every 3 years, you need to do the BSEGs before your cycle visit for that 3 years, or 5 years if you're a 5-year community. That will also help integrate the training, which is that last component of all the training hours that are needed. So if there's mentoring where your director of code goes out with an inspector and helps them and gives them mentoring at a home while they're doing an inspection, that counts for BSEGs training under employee data. Similarly, if emergency management hosts multi-jurisdictional trainings, and one of the things that we do is an evacuation exercise because we are in a hurricane zone. If you have somebody from floodplain management, go to that. You can be an evacuee. You could be an observer. However you could participate, you get credit for that training. You don't have to put it on. You don't have to do the invites. Emergency management does all of that for you, and you can leverage that credit. Here's an example of what we do in emergency management and that you probably are aware happened. It's circumstantial intelligence gathering. This is a screenshot from Hurricane Harvey. Snapchat actually will congregate if you are looking for the word flood or looking for activity of most concentrated status in an area. You can actually pull up information about what's happening real time in a survey like this. Currently, one of the things that was going to happen in the city was they were going to put a push mechanism. So anybody that wanted to send pictures of flooded streets for record, which helps you in your grants, of this 400 block of such and such boulevard is flooded again. There's no obligation from somebody in your department or emergency management to respond that it's been received, but they can upload pictures real time into a database that will help you with your grants when you want to put in larger drainage pipes or enhance culverts or things like that. You can show evidence to FEMA of all the damage that's been done, given by other people that are helping you in the community get the information out there. Something that's a little proactive that's intentional is this was developed by a retired military person and is currently being tested, but it's something that right now we're looking at active shooter. What could have happened at the Las Vegas shooting at the concert is, hey, we're going to ask 3 questions. We can isolate it to certain cell towers. We can isolate it to a zip code and send an email push, similar to an Amber Alert. Hey, there's a shooting going on. Click one of these, evacuated safely, hiding, or helping somebody injured. And what this does is there's 2 buttons you click and then submit. Here is a heat map On the left, you can see literal heat of how many answers are coming in about hurt, hiding, I'm injured myself. And then it also translates into little icons on the other side of the screen. We can do this for flooding, for USAR, for search and rescue when there are streets flooded and we have to go into people's homes, when we're having these climate change induced large flooding and disaster events from rainfall. We can actually use this and leverage this to come up with new systems, but it's emergency management based. They can get the information, integrate it with our 911 folks in order to send out deployed resources when it's needed. Here's another one for open space, another chapter in the CRS manual and the addendum. Again, back to that original interactive map I showed you that's on the homepage of the City of Kenner. Here's some other things that we updated, and I did this with the addendum in mind. If you're writing your watershed management plan that will be adopted by the chief executive of your city, parish, county area, we already had this done for our last cycle visit for 2018, and it's in place now with some enhancements: critical habitats, essential habitats, wetland inventory. And you can see the different colors. And I also have highlighted the drainage canals. Again, we're not exactly above sea level. So the drainage canals and pumping systems help pump the water out beyond the levees, which is also important to know when you're looking at mapping. Open space has another layer that can come on top of this. So you see there's a country club noted. We have a letter from them that states they will not be developing, and we can actually use the golf course as open space smack in the middle of the AE flood zone. So that's very helpful. If there is a larger community development of apartments or condos and they put in detention and retention ponds and recycling water, things like that, you can get letters from them as well stating that their courtyards and their open space will not be included. Other letters such as deeds, will restrictions, regulations in your community in ordinance that say these playgrounds, which might have swing sets and slides and things, will remain in open space form for the AE flood zone. That all gives you creditable data so that you can get more points in your open space. The reason that I have our drainage canals is because there is a requirement for no building by the drainage canal. So all that open green space is set by regulation to not be developed. So that is also creditable. So think a little outside the box. We got a grant for open space development and planting trees in the middle of one of our largest streets. I said, I want that as big as it possibly can be because I can credit that greenery, those trees, planting the right trees in the middle of a road as open space. That counts. So think a little outside the box as you're improving safety and getting rid of what they call suicide lanes in the middle, which are those left turn lanes, and putting in safety barriers. Make it green space instead of cement, and that contributes to your open space. All right. So I just mentioned deed restrictions, letters of restriction. The deed restriction in Frick Park in Pittsburgh, I'm originally from there. The Frick family donated that entire green space, which has a runoff and 9-mile run to the Monongahela River. When Mr. Frick passed and gave the land to his daughter, they put that in perpetuity to be green open space, no development. Things like that help. Utility not yet built areas. We have a very large substation in the middle of one of the AE flood zones. You cannot build right beside the substation. So there's an agreement that that open space can be used literally in the open space credit. I mentioned playground and school recreation, also natural functions. We don't have a lot of that. We do have one detention pond area that we're looking to try to make it into green infrastructure. It has been recorded by survey for 100 years that is a runoff area next to a CDBG development and keeps that area dry. So we're looking at that. Before I get into regulatory standards, I want to show you a video that's going to show you how else you can use emergency management in that open space.
Living in South Louisiana guarantees one thing: water, and lots of it. We get water from everywhere, whether it's from Lake Pontchartrain, the mighty Mississippi, or even from the sky. Dealing with water is a way of life for residents of Kenner. And with the water comes flooding. Even with large-scale improvements in levees and pumping stations, the risk remains for water to rise in our streets and our homes, often unexpectedly. This is why city officials urge residents about the need for flood insurance for both buildings and contents. Now is the time to make sure your flood insurance is up to date, but you may still have questions. Let's start with the basics. What does base flood elevation, or BFE, mean? FEMA defines the base flood elevation as the computed elevation to which the water is anticipated to rise during a flood event with a 1% chance of occurring in any given year, more commonly known as the 100-year flood. The 2018 FEMA flood insurance risk maps, found on the official City of Kenner website, has the elevation for any address in the city. Remember though, each rain event is different and flooding may vary. Why is my flood insurance different than my neighbor's? Several factors may affect your insurance rate, including flood zone, the elevation of the lowest floor, any previous flooding, other structures on the property, such as garages, and location of air conditioning units, generators, and hot water tanks. Is Zone X a no-flood zone? An X zone has just as much of a chance of flooding as other zones, but the depths may be less. Surprisingly, 20% of all flood claims in the U.S. are made from properties in the X zone. What if I don't have flood insurance? FEMA, the National Flood Insurance Program staff, and Mayor Zahn urge residents to speak with their insurance agents about purchasing flood insurance. The good news is that FEMA's community rating system score for Kenner has improved, resulting in lower premiums in both the AE and X flood zones for eligible policies.
Here in Kenner, we have a lot of rain events, hurricanes, flooding throughout the area. We want to make sure when you live in Southeast Louisiana, particularly here in the city of Kenner, make sure you have your flood insurance. Have your flood insurance for your home and your business. Protect your property. Very, very important. Get that flood insurance. Thank you.
Great. So you can also see in that video the higher regulatory standards. You can see the outline of the city because of that drone video. All of this plays into how you can improve things, sometimes without spending money of your own. The stormwater management ordinance, for instance, we just put forward 5 different ordinances, coordinating them at the same time so that all of the square footage space is the same. They all cross-reference the same 10, 50, 100, 500-year storms. That really helps so that when developers or residents, even for their own home or what they're thinking about doing, can look, and we put cross references in so none of that is missed. So in the stormwater management ordinance, we've added load development impact. We've also put in the flood damage prevention ordinance, talking about critical infrastructure. That's another thing in the addendum that will help you out. Hazardous materials language from the fire department. We have some storage sites of some, methyl ethyl bad stuff. There are berms around that. So when they deluge with water or foam, it keeps that hazardous material isolated and not flowing into our drainage system. That's something that you can add too. Construction, no fill in any zones. Bouncing back to the other side. In your ordinance, if you have trash and dumping as a crime, that helps deter. That's not something that you as a floodplain manager have to go out and do. But if you leverage things in emergency management that we do for debris removal, that you do in code enforcement for those sorts of things, it actually helps a lot. Matching your ordinance, as I mentioned, to the 1/2 acre for simplicity. If you have developed your ordinance over time and not aligned them, you may find some hiccups. It took a long time to do these 5 ordinances, and there's a 6th one that's going separately, but it really helps improve the community, and the only cost was the employee that was looking at them. All right. One new line that you can add into your ordinance too is that the floodplain manager, floodplain coordinator, and or your chief building official have the right to inspect at least annually, so people don't go do things outside of permit. It's a surprise inspection. You show up, That's how we've caught some people saying, oh, this is just going to be a carport. And they actually try to block in walls and make a new room that is below base flood elevation and not in accordance with code. It's not saying that you will go out and inspect, but it gives you the right and it gives them the heads up in ordinance. Our landscape ordinance, we work with Public Works and our landscape architect to make sure that trees are not planted, the large class A, by the drainage lines. Simple things like that. So when developers come in, they know they have to follow the ordinance, but they don't do things that will damage the community. And then wastewater ordinance in the city of Kenner, it was from 1991. It covers everything CRS needs. And we have to remember too that we have extra additives because we have to pump up to the plant since that area is below sea level. All right. So some other things I mentioned already, substantial damage procedure, that SDMP, we had it since 2011. We did our cursory review. Remember, FEMA will do that. And your on-site auditor will go ahead and do a cursory review. So get your test score before you get your test score. It's a great idea. The same thing with the construction certification management plan, CCMP. We did the same thing for that as well. Look to emergency management, look in code enforcement. There are likely these things already in existence that you just have to put in the new FEMA language. Checklists. We put into effect checklists to make sure it makes code's job easier when they're out. We also, every permit, whether online or in person, has the flood insurance brochure from FEMA in the packet. So you get all the information in a packet handed to you or downloadable to meet that new addendum credit. And one other thing that you might not think it pertains, because this is an HR issue, if your community does annual performance reviews and quality control, you have done part of your BSEG's employee data sheets. You just need to put this into policy. Just like trouble spots, if your public works teams before a storm goes out and troubleshoots stormwater drains that they know get backed up, if you had it in a policy, you get extra points for that as well. All right. Last, a little bit about the money. A lot of grants come through Homeland Security and Emergency Management. This just names a few. There are going to be other discussions about BRIC, CDBG-DR, those sorts of things. But there are a lot of opportunities in emergency management grants that will favorably impact floodplain, favorably impact critical infrastructure, drainage, other things like that. It's not just about giving money to police, fire, and EMS for the tools that they need to use. It can be used in a lot of different ways. So talk to your emergency management folks. EMPG, they might be able to get you some supplies that you need in the field, such as tablets or laptops, to make sure that your SDMP and CCMP can be done all online much faster. Talk to them about other opportunities as well in your community. Sometimes we're looking for projects that would help widen the scope of what we're doing, but still fits into the investment justification. So talk to them about those things. I want to thank you very much for joining me today, and I will go ahead and take some questions.
Excellent presentation, Heather. Thank you so much for stepping into the emergency management role in CRS. And given that, it's interesting, Josh mentioned that the title is CRS Coordinator, not CRS Doer. And I've never heard that. I'm going to be copying it forever now. So in that context, can you discuss a little bit more about how the emergency management fits into that, including helping the coordination with other departments?
Sure. So emergency management officials are somewhat doers, but we are also coordinators for logistics and making sure everybody else has what they need. Some of the things we do annually are required by the Department of Homeland Security and our state offices of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. So the example I used of an evacuation practice, so you do a training or actually do a real live, how are we going to evacuate people? We're required every year as an emergency manager to do that. If you go as an attendee or be a victim that needs evacuated, that gives you your full credit for that. You don't need to coordinate with all these state, local, and county or parish agencies. They're already doing that. So emergency management does a lot of stuff like a storm-ready community. We do weather alerts, things like that, tsunami warnings in certain places, earthquake warnings. You don't need to do it. Just connect with emergency management. I saw one of the comments was bringing emergency management and floodplain management together. I do that in my own individual role, but there's a lot of communities that have multiple people that you can pull in together and work as a team and help get that lift for your community.
Awesome. So one of the questions about using the push videos where the municipality doesn't respond, do you experience many submittals from community members?
We have a very active and involved community on multiple topics. So it's not just my, West Esplanade has flooded or Williams Boulevard, the 400 block is flooded. So they do that right now on Facebook, on Twitter, Nextdoor, a lot of the communities where we listen to their groups and they follow our groups. So one of the questions that we had was, how can we document it in emergency management so I can have a pool mechanism so that I can download and have a database of it. That way I can sort it out, use it for my BRIC application. And the reason that I need all the federal money in BRIC is because I need to expand the drainage capacity, or I need to do other things. Look at these 45 comments from the public, not that the one public worker went out to say, oh, look, I took one snapshot, but it's time stamped, it's from multiple sources, and they can see. And over time, you can do a search for how many times has the 400 block of Williams flooded, and you can give that repetition that maybe didn't create repetitive loss, but I have a historical aspect of it.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Heather. Fantastic presentation from you and Shannon and Josh and Katie and the whole team. So thank you all so much. And we're going to see you in the plenary.
Thank you.
We're out.